the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us bow our heads, please. Dear Lord, once again we come before you, just thanking you for another day. Thanking you for all your blessings and your mercy and your grace. We ask that you will come into the midst of this meeting. Let us all be on one accord. Give us the right mind and the right heart in making the decisions that we have to make today for the citizens of this county and for our county. We thank you for all our military staff, our staff that protects us in our home place. We just can't thank you enough for all that you do for us. This is my prayer. Amen.
Thank you, Commissioner McCoy. And I failed to welcome everyone, but we're glad to see the turnout today. And we'll move right into item 3 on the agenda, the waiver policy for parks and rec facilities.
Obviously, came to y'all a couple weeks ago and kind of discussed a request from a user of our tennis court facilities for a fundraiser that wanted to reduce or waive the fees, which at that time you guys decided that we should put a written policy in place for that. History of it is we had gotten requests in the past and we had told people that they needed to come to the Board of Commissioners to get that fee waived. Nobody had taken us up on that, so this was really the first time. At that point, obviously, made us look at this policy as an actual written policy. So I do want to go over this briefly. Hopefully y'all got a chance to take a look at it before today, but I do want to summarize it real quickly. The purpose of this policy is designed to provide an equitable means for event program organizers to apply for fee reductions or waivers to establish mutual beneficial partnerships between the department and the community. Obviously, we set fees each year at the beginning of the budget process that we recommend. We review them each year. We recommend them to the board, and the board sets those fees. So that's where it all comes from. This is to reduce those fees that we currently have. There are several different categories that would make you eligible to receive a fee reduction or a waiver. One is intergovernmental cooperation, obviously between different towns in the county, school board in the county, other departments in the county. That's department-sponsored programs that we have. Organizations that are considered a financial hardship, if they had to pay the fee to be able to put on their programs, or nonprofit organizations, and then also private community benefits. So if they're benefiting the community, that's another option. We have several kind of things that would not make you eligible for waivers or reductions, and one is if you do not open your event to the public, you obviously would not be able to get a waiver. If events are political in nature or religious organizations that are not religious organizations that want the waivers, if they're actually trying to provide the religious services at our facilities, they wouldn't be eligible for a waiver. And then these fees are just for the rental fees. It's not for any other type of deposits or insurance requirements, or if there's a cleaning fee or anything else, it wouldn't waive those fees. It's just for the reservation fee. So if we charge $15 per hour to rent our picnic shelters, it is just for that $15. It's not for anything else. It's not for the deposit or anything on that part. The criteria we have having this for the waiver criteria is that if it is a nonprofit organization, they have to provide proof to us. The organization must explain how they're going to use their participation fees if they are charging participation fees. If the fees would create a financial hardship on the organization, they have to show us why. If it's determined that a proposed event or program will have a significant impact on the facilities or the department activities, and they would not be able to use it. But I think one of the main criteria to be able to get the waiver is that it provides a general public benefit to the community. So that's kind of the main idea. Is if it provides something to Harnett County, then obviously we would look at it more likely to give the waiver. And obviously, any type of county program that we already have takes precedence over anything that we're looking at getting a waiver. The process of going through the waiver, there is in your form, at the very back is a waiver form that would have to be submitted that gives us pretty much all the information on the event. That would be submitted if they're in any other forms, including if they were a nonprofit, they would have to send that 501c3 in, as well as the insurance requirements also. All that stuff would be submitted to the Parks and Recreation Department. We would take a look at it, get it, receive it, and then from that point, we would take it to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee and let them review it before it comes to the Board of Commissioners. So they would review it and they would recommend whether it be approved or denied with the fee, and then you guys would take a look at it at that point. So you would have kind of a buffer between somebody else would look at it before it ever got to y'all for a recommendation, and you could obviously approve it based on their recommendations or deny it, so you still have the final choice in that. But there is a process. It would go, there are some deadlines in there. We hope to get it into, say, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee meets every other month, so people have to actually prepare ahead of time for this. It's not somebody coming up the week before saying, hey, I want a reduction, and then obviously, we're trying to rush it through. It actually does take some planning on these people's part to ask for the reduction. So, any questions from you guys?
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Davis? What's the pleasure of the board? Do you want to put this on the consent agenda for next week? Or do we need more time to talk about it, think about it? Or what's the pleasure of the board?
Didn't they say they were going to meet? Then we talk about it.
So,
Is your board going to meet?
no, so it would go, what would happen is these forms would be submitted to, the user would submit the form to the Parks and Recreation Department, and we would submit, the Parks and Recreation Department would put it on the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee's agenda to review it during their normal meeting. They would decide if they want to approve or deny the request, and then we would get it to, the Board of Commissioners would obviously make the final decision at that point.
Right.
But I mean, as far as, we can, if you want to wait on it, on my next Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee meeting is mid-November, so we can put it through them first if they want to review it, and then we can put it on the consent agenda afterwards if that's the way you want to go, or.
Do that?
I'm fine with putting it on the consent agenda for next week.
Are you?
Good.
Next week?
Yes.
Commissioner McCoy? Did you put that on the consent agenda for Monday's meeting?
This month?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
All right, next we have a discussion of the lease of county property for a billboard. Mr. Royster?
Morning, how are y'all today?
Good morning.
So I wanted to come talk to y'all today. We have a piece of property that's owned by Harnett Regional, well, the county. It's on Harnett Regional Water off this property, and it sits right on Main Street here in Wilmington, heading south. There's a billboard that sits there. It's about 850 feet south of McKinney Parkway intersection right there. And there's two billboards. This is the one that's kind of further back from the river. Interstate has had a lease with the county ever since we acquired that property. There's been a billboard there for at least 30 years. The last lease we entered into with Interstate was back in 2008, and it was for 10 years. So the lease would have run up in 2018. However, for one reason or another, it just never got renewed. So Mr. Kirk Edgerton with Interstate reached out to me wanting to renew the lease for another 10 years, just continue what has been a long-standing relationship and lease that they have had for that property for the purpose of having their billboard there. With part of this lease, what they are proposing is replacing the old billboard, which is it's a 4 wooden post billboard with the sign sitting on top. It's about 25 feet up in the air. They're wanting to replace it with a steel monopole that's still the same, 25 feet up in the air. And part of what's being proposed is that they will pay $2,000 per year for the first 5 years for the lease, increasing that to $2,200 per year for years 6 through 10. Currently, for the past 10 years, they've been paying $1,800. My review of the lease is that it's standard. It keeps in conformance with what we've had with them in the past. So part of what I do when I review a lease is I got to look at where we find ourselves and where I find all the parties. And this is nothing really outside of the blue. This is nothing that I have heartburn about. If this is the pleasure of the board to continue to lease it out. The reason I'm here today is because North Carolina statute requires any lease of real estate. We can lease it up to 10 years, which is what Interstate is asking. I have to provide a 30-day public hearing notice. So we got to get that done daily record. So essentially that notice, what it says is it gives the location of the property. It gives the price at which it would be leased at per year. And then essentially it's a statement saying that it is the intent of the board to approve it. And then, so in 30 days time, we would come back for public hearing, see if anybody has anything to say about this lease. And then the board at that time would just take a vote on it. So I'm here today, one, to see if this is something that the board is interested in pursuing. Two, to get the okay from y'all to go ahead and post this in the Dunn Daily Record if it is something that you'd like to pursue, and then hopefully to get it on the agenda for 30 days out, or the next meeting regular meeting that would follow 30 days out. And I have Mr. Edgerton here from Interstate if there are any questions on the monopole structure they're looking to add, or any questions about just the space that they've been utilizing in general. And I'm happy to take any questions or comments at this time.
Anyone have any questions? Yes, Commissioner McCoy.
What kind of advertisement is going to be used on this billboard?
So it's Interstate's just an outdoor advertising company. So it's just whomever pays for them to advertise. Right now, on one side of the billboard is Bojangles, and I remember Bojangles being there when I moved to Wilmington back in 2008, and they're still there. Right now, on the other side is our local health department that is advertising.
Okay, so they leased it out.
Yes, ma'am. So they lease the billboard space for advertising. So that's who's currently on there. And like I said, as soon as I saw the Bojangles site, I knew exactly which one it was because it's been there for as long as I can remember.
Okay.
So what you need from us is the authorization to go ahead and set the public hearing, is that correct?
Set the public hearing and to go ahead and issue the notice.
Have you heard any comments from the city of Lillington or town of Lillington?
No, sir, I've not. Is that something you'd like for me to reach out to?
I'd just like to know what their feeling about the
Okay.
billboard is. I know not every town views it the same. Some towns are opposed, some are in favor. I'd just like to know what their thoughts are.
Okay.
Is everyone in agreement with going ahead and setting the public hearing, moving forward? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll work with Ms. Capps to get that 30
Okay.
days from your regular meeting.
Very good.
All right. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. All right, item 5, property transfer to the city of Dunn.
Mr. Chairman, I gave you a short memo on this with some diagrams of the property and everything. Commissioner Johnson had asked me to look into donating 2 small parcels of land to the city of Dunn. Their city manager, Steve Newshafer, has provided the attached background information on the 2 parcels as well as pictures. Both have been and continue to be used by Dunn for sewer pump stations. Both are extremely small parcels that could serve no other purpose. According to Commissioner Johnson and Steve Newshafer, it was discussed several months ago but never acted upon. I ran this by Coley, Bryan, and Steve Ward, just to make sure that we had no use for the properties, and none of them did. One is 0.09 acres, so 9/100ths of an acre, with a value of $1,980. The other is 0.13 acres with a value of $2,830. My recommendation is that you donate both parcels to the city of Dunn at no charge. If you look at the diagrams which they've provided and the pictures of the lots, you'll see that the lots are very small. The only thing located on them are the two sewer pump stations, so they have no other purpose. And we don't need the property. Frankly, I'm a little surprised it wasn't donated to them years ago, because, I mean, once you put a pump station on it, there's nothing much you can do, and they're very small parcels. So with that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Wood? We don't have to have a public hearing to transfer this, do we?
I don't believe so. Dwight, do we have to have a public hearing on this?
When you're donating to another municipality or local government, I don't think you do.
You don't?
I can confirm that. No, I don't think you do. I think you can just vote to do it.
Okay.
Let us confirm that. So I don't realize that question we asked tonight. Let me confirm that.
Okay. Assuming it's correct, then what we ask you to do is let us put it on the agenda for Monday. If it requires a public hearing or anything like that, then we would schedule that. In other words, we would take the next step that we need to transfer this property at no cost to Dunn, if that's what you want to do.
Is consensus of the board to go ahead and put this on the consent agenda, and then if we have to have a public hearing, we can pull it off and table it until we've had time to advertise the public hearing?
Yes.
Is the board in agreement with that?
Yes.
Commissioner McCoy?
Yes.
Okay,
All right.
that's what we'll do. All right, item 6, ordinance amendment for water and sewer capacity allocations.
Mr. Chairman, we went over this in quite a bit of detail at the last meeting. I wasn't intending to go back through it in detail, but the main reason is for the next agenda item, and that is that if you're going to change the water and sewer ordinance, which is what this does, you have to hold a public hearing. And so the next item down is to schedule the public hearing for October 26th, and that would be at 9 a.m. The reason we're doing that and not the 18th is we need to advertise it for 10 days. So if we do it right after this meeting, we can meet that criteria. So if you're, I'll be happy to answer any questions about the report. And then if there are none, then we can go ahead and just go to the next agenda item, which is just asking you to give us a motion to set the public hearing for the 26th.
You good with it? We need to make a motion?
Commissioner McCoy, you good with the public hearing on the 26th?
Yes.
That's the day we're going to be discussing redistricting in a special call meeting.
Right, and that's why we put it on there, because you'd already be in that anyway.
When we advertise for the special call meeting, we have to advertise both, right?
Yes.
There's no special meeting.
Huh?
Well, it is a regular meeting, excuse me, the 26th is a regular
26 is a work session?
work session.
Okay,
But if you call for the public hearing during the work session and the
Yeah.
vote, we can do that.
okay.
And I do want to stress, we're asking y'all to consider a vote. We have one developer whose project is very time sensitive, and they have asked if we could try to do a vote right after the public hearing. So that's your discretion, but we would recommend that you do that if you're ready to go with it.
Okay, is everybody in agreement with putting it on that? Yes, ma'am, Commissioner McCoy.
I did hear some discussion about the redistricting meeting. Has that date been set?
Yes, ma'am. It's been, it's 26th at 9 a.m. So basically, we would have those back to back. I think what we've been doing, since that was a joint meeting with the school board, is we would do that first. Then adjourn, they can adjourn their part of the meeting, and then we would continue on with ours.
Will we have to come in here to take care of that business?
We can do it however you want to do it. Our plan is like with all our joint meetings with them, is we would start downstairs. Call the meeting to order, they'd call their part out of order, we'd go through the public hearing part, Mr. Shower would make his presentation on the districts, and then wherever y'all go from there on what you want to do with those. And then once that's finished, the Board of Education could adjourn and our meeting would just continue. And then the next thing on our agenda we would schedule would be the public hearing on this water and sewer ordinance amendment.
I'm curious why, the notice haven't been sent out about the redistricting meeting being reset, because I have not received anything on it. This right here is just passive conversation about it. So.
Well, I think that notice is getting ready to be sent out. Have you sent it yet?
No, sir. I have not. I thought the 26th was your regular meeting, so.
It
I mean,
is.
one of our regularly
It is.
scheduled work
Yes,
sessions.
it is.
So it wouldn't require a special meeting.
But I think you're wanting to get some publicity on it, if I'm understanding you.
Well, I think we all need publicity on it. I think it should be advertised and put out in the public.
Okay,
Well, we can do that.
absolutely.
We can do that.
And what happened is we were trying to do a special meeting on the 20th or 21st, but that didn't work with the school board schedule, so.
So that was what I heard. You said, you told me the 20th and the 21st.
Right.
Then I'm hearing in here, I'm passing discussion that you have decided on the 26th. This is a major issue.
It
We,
is.
as well as the public, should know about it.
We wanted to do it on the 20th or 21st.
Okay,
It didn't meet their needs,
okay.
and so,
I understand that. I'm just saying that it should have been put out in the public. And, I don't understand why I'm just hearing about it now.
well, because we had to come back to you with it. But
Okay, that's
that
fine.
gives us 14 days to get some
I'm
advertisement.
not making an issue out of it, but I just want to make sure that the public is aware about what we're doing here as far as redistricting.
Well, we'll do a notice of it as if it were a required public hearing. And that'll give us some advertisement on it.
And we always publish the agenda, so
Yeah.
the public will know that we're going to be talking redistricting that day.
Okay.
All right?
So,
Uh,
is everybody okay with, I guess technically we need a motion to call a public hearing.
Do I hear a motion, well, we need to set that public hearing, right?
Right, that's
Okay.
what, that's what.
Do I hear a motion to set the public hearing for the 26th?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just to be sure, you set that public hearing on that date. Do you also need to take action to make that a voting meeting since it's a work session?
Okay.
I would request that.
Do I hear a motion to make the meeting on October the 26th a voting meeting?
I'll make a motion to make that meeting a voting meeting.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right. We'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is item 8. Recommendation for the elimination of late fines in materials.
Good morning.
Good to see you guys this morning. I'm really excited about presenting a new initiative for the Harnett County Public Library. I'm really excited about telling you about it. And I have our Assistant Director, Joanna Cox. She's actually kind of tag team this project, and she's actually going to give you a nice presentation to explain and break everything down in a minute. But I kind of wanted to set her up and kind of give you an idea of what to expect. So the mission of the Harnett County Public Library is to cultivate lifelong learning, empower individuals, and to strengthen our community. And as public service, it's very important for us to be hyper aware of our community changes. And these past couple of years, well, especially since COVID, we know that we've experienced tremendous changes or experiencing tremendous growth in our community. And we have to examine how these changes impact those community needs, and we have to continuously seek out ways to tear down barriers that keep people from being able to use our services and to achieve our goals. So some of the barriers that prevent people from using library services are often related to location and transportation. We don't have any libraries in the western part of Harnett County. To be able to break down that barrier, we would need to go build a library or purchase some type of mobile vehicle to be able to take services out there. That would be a very expensive barrier to break down. It's achievable, especially with some grant funds and some help from the state, but that's a huge project that would involve a lot of money. Breaking down barriers in remote or underserved communities, again, is something that we do want to achieve, but again, very expensive. But today we want to discuss a barrier that many people encounter that we can tear down very easily and very inexpensively. And it would have a potential for making great impact for the people that need and use our libraries. And this barrier is the policy for our overdue late fines. So around 2018, there became a movement across the nation and in North Carolina specifically. And the initiative was to remove overdue late fees from library fine policies. It became a huge trend, again, both state and nationwide. And we too discussed that possibility, but we had some concerns, and we looked at it from various angles. And these concerns included things like loss of revenue. We bring in some money for overdue late fines, and that would go away. Lack of motivation for patrons to bring back their materials if there was no penalty for bringing them back in a certain amount of time. And then the loss of library materials, like what if they don't bring them back at all? So we really considered those things, and we hesitated on moving forward with other libraries because, well, we want to be good stewards of taxpayer money. We want to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And we kind of wanted to see what would happen with other libraries who were moving forward with that. We wanted to hear what happened. Did it really help? Did they have regrets after going that way? So we took the wait and see approach. We wanted to make sure that we gathered some facts that proved that the benefits would outweigh some of the loss that we would have. So we're 3 years into these libraries implementing fine-free policies, and these libraries are surprisingly reporting outcomes that exceed their initial expectations. And we now have some compelling reports, and we have some data from these fine-free libraries. Assistant Library Director Joanna Cox is going to present these findings as well as other fine-free information as it relates to Harnett County. It is our intent to provide you with the knowledge needed to make an informed decision about the library's initiative to eliminate our overdue fines for the purpose of more effectively serving the citizens of Harnett County. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to Joanna.
Good morning. Ben, where is it? Oh, gotcha. Thank you. There we go. Thank you.
All right, so as we stand today, about 23% of all library card holders in the Harnett County Public Library System have overdue charges attached to their account. So that's around 17,000 people that have lost or are at risk of losing their library access due to late fines. And as Angela said, what I'm going to be pitching to you all today is a proposal for the Harnett County Public Library System to go fine-free, which means eliminating those overdue item penalties that create barriers to library access in our community. And before I start actually going into fine-free, I'd like to briefly go over what our current fine structure looks like at the library. Currently, we charge daily overdues for materials that vary depending on the type of item. So books and audiobooks are 10 cents a day, DVDs are 50 cents a day, and then launch pads, which are like preloaded electronic tablets that we circulate for children, those are $1 a day. And then we also use grace periods. So a grace period is the length of time between an item's due date and the date that the overdue fines are applied to a patron's account. Books and audiobooks have a 9-day grace period, and they also have one automatic renewal, and then the DVDs and the launch pads do not. And then all of these overdues have different fine limits. So for example, a patron can be charged a maximum of $10 for all of the overdue books on their account. For DVDs, it's $20, and then for launch pads, it's $30. And then as far as overdues are concerned, accounts are considered officially blocked when the fines have reached $10 or more, or when any overdue charge on the account has reached 90 days. And now consider the fact that some of our heaviest users are retirees and parents. A parent, for example, may check out 40 or more children's books in one library visit. And if just 4 of those books come back a month late, they get left in a book bag, they fall behind the couch, as children's books tend to do, that would rack up enough overdue fines to prevent that entire family from accessing the library. And so that's a summary of our overdue policy. We also charge fees for lost and damaged items. An item is considered lost when it has been overdue for 30 days. And at that point, the patron is charged the full retail price of the item to replace it, and they are blocked from accessing library resources until that item is either paid for or returned. And then we also charge damage fees, and those can vary depending on the severity of the damage. And the thing to really take note of here is that when we talk about going fine-free, we are only talking about eliminating these fines that are considered overdue. So these fines that you see at the top, if we eliminate those, here we go. If we eliminate those, you see that we would continue to charge lost and damaged fees, and we would continue to block accounts with lost items and excessive damage charges. So the bottom line is that patrons still must return their items, and they must return them in usable condition in order to utilize library resources under a fine-free structure. They're just not going to be penalized for returning them late. All right, so everybody associates overdue fines and overdue library books with the library, and so why is that? There are 3 main reasons why historically libraries have charged their patrons overdue fines. And that main one is accountability. So if we don't charge overdue fines, then how are we holding people accountable for returning their items? But the fact is, studies have shown that people are actually less likely to return items that they know they owe overdues for. And as those fines rack up, the patron loses their library privileges and the library loses the item. So it's really a lose-lose situation for both the patron and the library. And if we were to go fine-free, again, we'd still penalize for those lost items. So if someone were to check out a book and keep it past the due date, they won't be charged overdue fines when the item is returned. Once that item goes into that lost status at that 30-day mark, the account is still blocked, which means no more checkouts, no more accessing library resources until that item is paid for or returned. So that's the incentive under a fine-free structure. Another one of the concerns that always comes up whenever libraries go fine-free is, what if everybody keeps all of their items checked out for a really long time? Will the library run out of books? Will wait lists get ridiculously late? By and large, libraries that have already gone fine-free have not seen an increase in items being returned significantly late. But even if our patrons were to start keeping their items longer, there are a couple of things to keep in mind here. One is that library collections, ours included, are a lot bigger than they used to be. In the last 30 years, the book collection alone in Harnett County has grown 150%. So that's 110,000 more books. Also keep in mind that Harnett County is a part of the NC Cardinal Lending Consortium, and that gives our patrons access to somewhere around 7 million items statewide. So if a customer can't get an item from us because it's checked out, we can easily get them a copy from somewhere else. Another reason why libraries have traditionally charged overdue fines is because of this misconception that overdue fines account for a significant amount of revenue. In reality, overdue fines are fairly insignificant in comparison to the library's budget. In the last 5 years, overdue payments have been equal on average to less than 1% of the library's budget. And I have some numbers here. So what I have up here are numbers for funding years 16 through 2019. And you can see the ratio of fines paid to our budget is basically a rounding error. In 2018, which was our last full pre-COVID year, it was about 0.5%. And these numbers that I have up here are specifically for the county libraries, but these ratios are fairly consistent with what we've seen at the municipal libraries as well. And then here's another way of looking at overdue data. Let me try to, scroll that down a little bit. So this includes numbers from all of the libraries. This is combined the municipal and the county libraries. And what I have up here is a comparison of the overdues charged to patrons versus the overdues that were actually paid for funding years 16, 17, and 18. I also have 2019 and 2020 up here, but keep in mind that these years are skewed due to COVID. We actually waived fines to help ease the financial burden of the pandemic, and we did that from March 2020 until just recently, September 2021. So funding years 16 through 18 are the most recent years with the most reliable data that we have. And what you can see up here is the dark blue bars are the overdues charged for that funding year, and then the light blue bars are what was actually paid by patrons and overdues that year. And what you can see is roughly a third to less than a half of the overdues that are charged to patron accounts actually get paid. So when we think about overdue charges as a source of revenue, the reality is that most overdue charges don't actually turn into revenue. And all of these people who have outstanding overdue balances on their account are at risk of losing their library privileges. Notice too that these numbers are trending down at a rate of about 10% a year. So even if COVID had not been a factor in 2019 and 2020, we would have likely still seen a decrease in overdue charges and overdue payments for those years. All right, so I've been mentioning library resources a lot, but what exactly do you lose when you lose access to library privileges? And what you really lose is access to resources. And there are a lot of very valuable resources that are provided by the library. This, of course, includes our physical collection, which includes educational and leisure materials, not just at our libraries in Harnett County, but also at the over 200 libraries that are members of NC Cardinal. A couple other things that you may not immediately think about when you think about library access and library privileges are computer access and access to our electronic resource collections. We have people come into the library every day who use our public computers to do things like look for and apply for jobs, apply for assistance like unemployment and Social Security, do schoolwork, a lot of tasks that are really essential, and a lot of these folks don't or can't get internet access at home. So the library is really the only place where they can go to do these things they need to do. We also have a vast and growing electronic resource collection that gives active customers access to tens of thousands of ebooks, audiobooks, magazines, and video. And they can access these resources from the ease and safety of home. And this includes resources for school-age children, teenagers, adults, and it also includes a very large collection of early literacy resources that younger children can use to build their beginner reading skills from home. And remember, we're not talking about eliminating penalties for those lost items. So those patrons who don't bring their items back at all will still lose library privileges, but the idea is that so long as you bring your items back, you retain access to all of these things. All right, so this is the reality of overdue fines. Charging overdue fines is not compatible with the Harnett County Public Library's goals. The first goal that we cite in our master plan is to encourage personal and economic growth, which we can't do if we're inflicting unnecessary financial burdens on our patrons and restricting their access to resources that can help them grow. And the second goal in our master plan is to provide consistently exceptional customer service. And this brings me to my next couple of points. So overdue fines perpetuate negative feelings about the library, and they create unnecessary tense interactions between our patrons and our staff. And think about the staff time involved in processing overdue fines. It can take anywhere between 5 to 15 minutes to explain, collect, and then process an overdue fee. And in instances where situations are escalated to management, that can take even more time. So when you consider the staff time involved in this process versus the amount of money you're taking in for the overdue, they often simply don't balance out in favor of the library. I think the average overdue transaction is for less than $6. It's around $5.40. And our average staff hourly rate is $16.25. So basically, any overdue transaction that takes 15 to 20 minutes or more actually winds up costing the library money. Also, overdue fines disproportionately affect users in socially and economically distressed areas of the county. And I've got a couple of visuals here to help illustrate this. So what you have up here, of course, are two maps of Harnett County. These are segmented out by zip code. And this map on the left was drawn up using the Distressed Communities Index. This is a scale that rates geographic areas on factors like poverty rate, household income, and the number of adults in the household without a high school diploma, among other things. And basically, the more red an area is, the more socially and economically distressed it's considered according to this metric. And then the map on the right reflects the number of users in those zip codes that owe overdues that equal $5 or more. The darker the purple, the more patrons who owe. And $5 may not immediately sound like a lot of money, but for a lot of people, it can be a fairly significant amount. It's almost a couple gallons of gas, it's a couple grocery store items, it's a meal, and we don't want to create a situation where someone who is in a distressed situation has to choose between paying their library fine and putting their earnings towards something that they really need. And so just kind of keep that in mind as I show you this next slide. All right, so what I have up here now is a graph that shows the relationship between overdue fines and the poverty rate in Harnett County. And what this basically illustrates is that the more an area collectively owes the library in overdue fines, the more likely they are to have citizens living below the federal poverty line. And what you can take away from this graph, and then the maps on the previous page, is that areas that have the most overdue fines, so chiefly the central and southeastern parts of the county, are also some of the areas that are the most marginalized and distressed. So those people who really need our resources the most are the ones who are at risk of losing their library access due to overdue fines. All right, so this is what fine-free really looks like. More and more libraries are going fine-free every year, and what they found is that eliminating overdues actually significantly increases their citizen engagement. They see more people coming in the doors, they see more items being checked out, they see more people participating in library programs, and they see more people coming in, new people coming in and registering for library cards. And what's really interesting is that fine-free libraries have actually seen a decrease in item losses. The Chicago Public Library, for example, they went fine-free in 2019, and they saw a 240% increase in item returns in the first 3 weeks that they went fine-free. And this included items that were overdue for months or even years, likely because the people were afraid of or embarrassed by the overdues that were attached to them. We actually have a staff member at the library now who was at the Wake County Public Library when they went fine-free, and she told me they had to actually section off a part of the library for all of their check-ins. There were so many long overdue items coming in those first few weeks that they chose to go fine-free in Wake County. And fine-free libraries aren't just seeing those long overdue items coming back, they're also seeing an overall decrease in items coming back past their posted due date. The Salt Lake City Public Library, for example, they went fine-free in 2017, and in their first year, they saw a 7% decrease in items coming back late. Going fine-free also gives our community members a better return on investment of their tax dollars. So when collection usage goes up, which as I've said is something we've consistently seen in libraries that have gone fine-free, that per capita cost for each user goes down, and then we see that ROI. All right, so like I said, fine-free is not a new concept. In fact, several library systems in North Carolina have already gone partially or fully fine-free. That includes Wake County, Chatham County, very recently Cumberland County, as well as several of our sister libraries that are a part of NC Cardinal. Little Davie County up there, they actually went fine-free a week ago today. And then in a broader context, there are over 500 libraries nationwide that are fully fine-free. And a couple years ago, the American Library Association actually came out against fines, saying that they create an economic barrier to access of library materials and services. And so we as the library and as a part of Harnett County government want to ensure that we are meeting the expectations of our citizens and that we're also meeting the expectations of potential future library employees and library leaders. And by committing to this very positive trend that's happening state and nationwide, we can attract new customers, and we can also recruit and retain the best talent for our department. All right, so the thing I want to leave you with here is just a reminder that the library is our community living room in Harnett County. It is the library's goal to encourage learning, growth, and prosperity in the county by providing community resources fairly and equitably. As such, we recommend the consideration of elimination of historical and future overdue fines for the Harnett County Public Library. Thank you all for your consideration of this request. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
On your new elimination late fines for materials recommended program, if a person doesn't bring the materials back and they get their permit membership revoked, is there a fee to reapply for that?
So that's a good question. So the way it works is when an item is checked out and it has its lending period, and like I mentioned in the earlier slides, so for books it's 3 weeks, for example. Once it's reached the due date, they essentially have 30 days in there before it phases into lost status. And once it's considered lost, it blocks the account. So anybody with lost items on their account can't use any library resources. Does that answer your question?
Do they have to pay a fee to
No. So once an item's lost, you either bring it back or you pay the retail price of the item. Once it's lost, what it technically does is charge them the retail price that we paid for the item, and their option is to either bring it back or pay to replace it.
What about repeat offenders?
For lost items? Well, I mean, once an item goes to loss, they can't check out anymore.
If they bring it back and get reinstated,
They'll be
and they do the same
reinstated,
thing
yes,
again?
Yes,
Same
if
thing
they
again?
bring them back, they're back to being an active patron.
Okay, so they can just not bring things back until the late fee, then they can keep doing that over and over?
Yes. If they as long as they bring it back under the fine-free structure, They don't receive any penalties for bringing it back late, that's right.
Okay.
I have a question. The existing late fees, there's a chart in there that shows by municipalities or by zip code what the late fees are. I don't think it's in your presentation. It's one we've got. But my question is, will existing late fees be forgiven?
Yes, that's what we're requesting, all historical, current, and future fines to be
Okay.
waived. Yes, sir.
My next question, does that apply to the municipal libraries?
So if this policy were to be approved by the county, the next step would be for the municipalities to approach their leaders and present the same thing and have it approved by their local leaders.
It does not require that, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, we're not
They're-
binding the
They're not
municipalities.
a part of our library. They share some
Well, they
services.
should be, but,
Right.
But it would be their decision on what to do.
Right.
okay.
But we would
All
do
right.
this as a system, so.
Because I noticed one, one zip code here had 8,900 or so, that's right at $9,000. Another zip code had over 6,000 late fees over $10 or more.
Right.
That's, and for a municipal library, $6,000, $7,000 is a significant amount of money to give up.
I would like to mention that we have been in talks with the library directors at our municipal libraries for some time, and they are all on board with doing this. They also see the value of doing it in their libraries, and essentially it will go to their local boards if they have a local board. Some do, some don't, and it will essentially go to their municipal administrators as well for a vote. I mean, that just has to be the way it goes, but it has to start here. There's no sense in them doing that if it's a moot point in this room. So this is the beginning of that. They can still, shoot it down and say, that's not for us. And if they do, that's fine. But this is our effort to at least get this initiative started.
I was just trying to get a feel for how that'll work with the municipal libraries, because they're not part of our library system, even though they should be.
And we're
I say that
hoping to-
again, they should be.
We're also working on that. That's also a plan in progress.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that. We have had discussions about that, and we've gotten some numbers, so that as y'all go into your next year's budget, that'd be the time to look at that.
Let me make a statement here. We approached the county commissioners, we being the Harnett County Mayor's Association, in 2016. That's 5 years ago, and we still don't have it done. Come on, people. Let's quit dragging our feet and kicking the can down the road and get something done.
The reason I wanna run it.
I'm not going to editorialize anymore.
I just wanna tell y'all, the reason we're trying to get all the information for you, but it is gonna be a significant cost. And so I wanted y'all to be aware of that, and that's why we're trying to get it.
George, we had that information 5 years ago. We had that information 5 years ago.
Well, all I'm trying to say is that right now, you don't have the money to do this on a continuing basis. And so you need to go through your budget process and identify a source of revenue for how you're gonna carry this out on a continuous basis. Because you really can't do it using fund balance, because a lot of it has to do with adding staff at these municipal libraries. And so we've got to have a continuing source of revenue to fund it, is the point I'm trying to make. And so that's going to take getting into your next year's budget. Hopefully you have some revenue growth in both your property tax and sales tax.
I understand.
So I don't know that anybody's opposed to it. It's like everything else is finding the money.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am, Ms.
I want to say this, I understand your concern because it has been going on for a long time. But at one point, I think it was on end of us making a decision as to how do we do this. There was some discussion about maybe the other libraries contributing some kind of funds to offset the cost, but we have never come to a real decision on that.
You're right. You're absolutely correct.
One of the, and that's another reason we need to look at it in depth, because really what you've got to decide is, which is the point you're making, is this gonna be a county-wide service? If it is, then the question becomes from a tax fairness standpoint, since municipal citizens are also citizens of the county, should they have to pay an additional fee for things that citizens of the county outside the municipalities are already paying at the same level through their county taxes? So if you require for instance, if you require somebody in Dunn to make a contribution towards the support of the county library system, but if somebody's just outside the city limits of Dunn, they don't have to pay any more except through their county taxes, then you get into the question of why are people in Dunn paying twice?
I don't think we got that far into the discussion, as my memory tells me, but you make a good point there. So I do agree that these things have to be discussed and us to try to work out how we're going to do this.
So we'll have the financial impact. We'll have that discussion, which I think is the core discussion you need to have.
Yeah.
Is there going to be any participation by the county, the cities, or are you transitioning completely over to a fully county-funded library system? And so all of that is wrapped up in this discussion, and that's why I think you're only a few months away from starting your budget process. And what we've asked Angela to do, which she's already done, is give us what would it take in each one of these libraries to bring them up to an equal standard. So, in terms of the operations, not in terms of the facilities. That's a whole another question that you're going to have to deal with. That's one that you can do at a later date and try to build some of those into your capital improvements program as well.
Commissioner McCoy, I will say that what Mr. Wood's talking about, the taxes in the municipality versus plus the taxes in the county, that was a discussion among the mayors when we were first discussing this. Yeah,
that is so true, but that discussion was not done. We didn't have the discussion between the county commissioners.
Right, I understand. Well,
when
you and I can talk about that offline as to why those discussions weren't held.
But as part of your budget process, our intent is Angela will be making that request in her budget recommendation to management. And so it will be a topic of discussion, and your new manager, whoever he or she is, will be dealing with that as part of the normal budget process.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to make a motion that we accept the library's recommendation to eliminate the late fees, because I serve on that board. And I know that in other cities, in other counties, some other counties across the state, they are doing that, and it seems to be working for them. So that would be my motion right now.
Okay. Is the consensus of the board that we put this on the consent agenda for our next meeting this coming Monday?
Yes. Consent agenda.
Okay. Madam Clerk, would you add that to the consent agenda for Monday's meeting, please?
Absolutely.
All righty. Thank you.
We'd like y'all to come back for that meeting in case there's any further discussion.
Well, if there's any discussion, we'll have to pull it off the consent agenda.
Right, but I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah. Does anybody have any other questions about this? Okay.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. All right, moving along to item number 9, the discussion of the engineering of record at the Jetport and Talbot and Bright.
Mr. Chairman, wanted to go over this memo with everybody. For the chairman and Commissioner Nickel, this is somewhat redundant because they're both members of this committee and they are your representatives on the Jetport Advisory Board. So they've been through all of this, I think, several times as we've wrestled with it. But I want to go through this primarily for Commissioner Johnson and Commissioner McCoy's benefit, because this has a lot of moving parts to it, and just want to make sure everybody's clear on what we're looking at and the timing of it, because we're running up against a time crunch on some of this stuff. And so anyway, we've had an ad hoc committee reviewing the final plans from Talbot and Bright engineers for the new airport terminal. And if you haven't seen them, I would encourage you, they're on the conference table in our conference room to take some time and look at them. The committee consists of Commissioners Weatherspoon and Nickel, and as I said here, they're your ex officio members of the Airport Advisory Board. Jerry Milton, who's the Advisory Board Chair, Coley Price, Barry Blevins, Natalie Pusser, and myself. And just to refresh your memory, Natalie is the young woman we hired from Warren Aviation out at the airport. At the first meeting, we intended to go over the plans because not everybody had seen them or was familiar with them. But the Airport Advisory Committee chairman brought up the idea of changing the construction method from the current design, bid, build to design, build. Normally that decision is made on the front end of a project. We agreed to have Chris Appel research the law and give us an opinion on how to proceed. That memo is attached for your review, and I'm going to go over a few points on it when I get through with this. Mr. Milton believes that we can save a substantial amount of money switching to design build, and we'll get a similar building. He also believes that a design build firm could have plans and specifications prepared within 60 to 90 days of selection. And I want to be candid with you, I don't agree with that assessment of his. We had a long discussion at 2 meetings on this and how to proceed with the upcoming November 13th ending date of the engineer of record contract and the subsequent selection of an airport engineer for a 5-year contract. We have an RFQ out, sent to 14 airport engineering firms specifically, with the deadline to respond being October 15th. So those RFQs are due back in here Friday. So again, that's October 15th. The contract expires November the 13th. So we have right at a month after we get those in to make a decision on what you want to do. That's not on how to build the building, that's on how to select an engineer of record. And remember, that contract is for 5 years. And the reason that the timing, we don't control the timing, that contract was entered into 5 years ago. State law, DOA, Division of Aviation, requires that every 5 years, or no later than 5 years, that you take RFQs and consider whether or not to stay with your current engineer of record or switch to another firm. And in order to do that, you have to use a request for qualification procedure. And so we're following that. And again, those will be due in Friday. The possible change of the engineer of record presents us with several options. And again, I'm going to refer to Chris Appel's memo for a detailed explanation, which you can read, and I would encourage you to read that in detail before the next meeting if you haven't already. So the committee discussed the various issues and recommends the following to you. Number one, we need to preserve all of our options because we have no idea if you will renew the engineer of record contract with Talbot and Bright or choose another firm, and that's your decision to make. There are 3 outstanding projects with Talbot and Bright: the runway apron expansion, the new airport terminal building, and the airport master plan update. As Chris noted in his memo, if you do not go with Talbot and Bright, we would need to negotiate with them on any of these projects we wanted to continue past the November 13th contract expiration. In other words, if we don't come to agreement with them, their participation in those projects ends on November 13th. And I think it was the consensus of the committee that we didn't want all of those to end. So number 2 is they're recommending that you negotiate with Talbot and Bright to finish the construction and inspection on the runway apron project. They designed it, they got it through DOA. It would have already been underway, but we had some of our pilots objected to having the runway, their access to the runway closed for such a significant period of time. We also have 6 King Airs from the United States Army out of Fort Bragg that are scheduled, that are at the airport now. So we are providing space for them on a temporary basis. We would like to see them finish up, which should be in early February at the latest, and get out of there before we have to do something to close the access to the apron so we can do the improvements on it. So they want you to, their recommendation is finish with the construction and inspection on that apron project with Talbot and Bright. Number 3, negotiate with Talbot and Bright to agree to finish construction of the terminal if, and I want to stress, if we secure the funding, and that's the funding we're waiting to find out whether that money is going to be in the state budget or not. This is just dragged out. The state budget is dragged out and dragged out.
It is in the state budget and will be there. And if the governor doesn't sign the budget, it will come out as a mini budget at some point later this year or early next year.
Okay. Well, we still wanted to put that caveat in there until we have everything. But that's news since we met then. You're telling us something we didn't know when we met last week. About.
We knew that. We've known that.
Well, you're saying it's definite. But
It's
we don't have a
100%.
signed budget.
That money is in the budget.
But
Now,
the budget hasn't been approved yet.
if the governor does not sign that budget, if the governor signs that budget, that money comes to us. If he doesn't sign it, it will still come to us. It's just going to take a lot longer because the legislature will have to pass a mini budget, like they did in 2019, I believe it was. They had to pass a series of mini budgets to get the funding out.
Okay. Well, we're putting that caveat in there about if we secure the funding to make 100% sure we get it. I understand what you're saying. And then the other thing is, and if you don't elect to switch to the design build method of construction. Number 4, negotiate with Talbot and Bright to finish work on the master plan on November 13th. Turn over all of its reports and information and turn that project over to the new EOR for completion. And this would allow the new engineer of record to have input into the master plan update. Now you may be asking, why would you cut that one off when you haven't cut off the other 2? Because the other 2 are close to being completed. This engineering record is going to go on. I mean, this master plan is going to go on. It's going to take through February 16th of '23. So there's like 16 months left. So the question is, do you want your current EOR to finish it, or if you've decided to go with another EOR, do you want to get their input into it? And so we have a good demarcation point on that. And so we're recommending, the committee is recommending to you that the way we would handle the master plan is that we would cut that off at whatever they've completed November 13th, which the contract says then they have to provide you all that documentation. Of course, you have to pay them for the work they've done, but then you can switch to your new engineer of record. So that's what we're recommending to you there. Number 5 is we want to have Talbot and Wright look at any options to reduce the cost of the building with specific recommendations. And by the way, we met with him late last week and he's agreed to do that. Following that, number 6, following that, we would have an independent construction estimator company give us a detailed takeoff on materials and labor for an estimated cost to construct the building, the site work, the parking lot, and the utilities. Now, I forwarded to you the email yesterday that I had gotten from Steve Bright with Talbot and Bright. He was following up with our meeting from last week. He sent it Friday. As y'all know, I don't work on Friday, so I didn't see this email until yesterday morning. When I got it, I read it, and then I sent it to all of you and asked you to read it before you came here today, and definitely before we discuss this further next week. So essentially what he's saying here is that in discussing this with an estimator company, basically what they're saying is there's been about 38 to 40% increase in pricing since 2017 when they had given original estimations to you. I want to stress the amount he's talking about, $4,200,000, is the building only. So there would still be the components for site work, utilities, parking lot, the lighting for the parking lot, things like that. So the building, they're estimating right now at $4.2 million, and that's as close as we can get it now, without hiring the estimator company to go into it in depth. They're giving you a ballpark figure based on what they had estimated before, and then applying the construction inflation of 38 to 40%. So that's how they've arrived at that. We would still recommend that before you finalize everything is that we have an estimator company come in. And by the way, that's already included in their contract to have an estimation done. Okay. Okay, that's number 6. Number 7, once you do all of that, so they basically, Mr. Bright has agreed, going back to his memo, he's agreed, he said actual bids could be much lower based on market factors at the time. To move forward, the county may consider, number 1, authorize Talbot Bright to obtain a professional cost estimate by Mulford, as we previously recommended. The budget for this work is already included in our work authorization as an option. Number 2, meet with the architect to discuss options to reduce project cost, which the committee is already recommending to you. He's agreed to do that. Discuss a strategy to request state or FAA grant funding to help offset project cost. We informed him that we were extremely hopeful we were going to have at least $6 million in the state's budget, but I think he's also looking at other possibilities. Then, depending on the above information discussions, consider bidding the project to obtain the actual cost to construct. Now, so let me go back to my memo to you from the committee. So after you've done all of those changes, looked at any cost savings he's come up with, having the estimator company give you a more detailed analysis of what their estimate of the cost is. Then at number 7, from there, you have 2 options. Number 1, you could bid the project out using Talbot and Bright's plans as amended. And amended means whatever cost savings he's recommending to come up with. This should include a provision that allows bidders to submit alternative bids on specific items that they think you could save money on and are asking you to consider. The architect would be available to review and recommend whether to make those changes. The architect is hired by you and has fiduciary responsibility to you as owner. Number 2, you could switch to a design-build method. And I want to stress the committee is not recommending one way or the other yet. We're still looking into that as to which way we're going to go. This would entail essentially starting over on the terminal building. By law, and again, go back to Chris Appel's memo in here, because he spells out the law for you. So by law, you would have to solicit RFQs from qualified general contractors, including the factors shown in Chris's memorandum. This will take some time to establish the criteria, then advertise, select those, interview, and select one firm to negotiate with. And by law, price cannot be a consideration in the selection process. So in other words, you can't solicit RFQs from these contractors and pick whoever says, well, I can build you a project with this many square feet for this amount of money. You can't do that. You have to go on qualifications only. You select one, and then you negotiate the price with them. Then the design-build firm would hire an architect to design the building. Note that in this method, the architect works for the builder, not you. So if the builder were to ask for a change order, you would normally have the architect give you a recommendation on whether to take the change order. But under design build, the architect works for the builder. So that is an issue we got to deal with. The second issue is how do you assure quality of materials is comparable? So those 2 issues, among others, are things that we're going to be looking at, comparing design build to design bid build, and then come back to you with a recommendation. The new plans and specifications could take months to prepare, and then would have to be sent to NCDOA just like the current ones. Number 8, and this is the critical point, you don't have to make that decision yet, whether to go design build or design bid build, and the committee will continue to study this before recommending a solution. But you do need to preserve your options to go either way. And so that's what the committee has spent a great deal of time on. So basically our recommendation to you is all the steps we talk about here leading up to then a decision on whether to go design build or design bid build. But in order to do that, what we've got to do is just what they're recommending, is negotiate with Talbot and Bright and make sure that if you want to continue with them, that, I mean, if you select them as the EOR and you enter another 5-year contract with them, then they will be the engineer of record and you wouldn't have to do anything more. The problem is this November 13th date is probably going to expire before we've necessarily made a decision, because we haven't even got the applications in, we haven't reviewed them, the committee hasn't made a recommendation to you, and you haven't voted. So again, what we're recommending is that you allow us to continue to negotiate with Talbot and Bright and make sure that they're willing to continue on past November 13th, if that's what you choose to do. And then we'll come back to you at a later date and with a recommendation on how to proceed on the construction part. So now we get to the more time-sensitive decision, and that is, what's the process you want to use for selecting an engineer of record for a 5-year term? The submittals are due, as we said, October 15th, which is this Friday. So the committee is recommending the following on this. Number one, have a subcommittee of Commissioners Weatherspoon and Nickel and the chair and vice chair of the Airport Advisory Committee and Natalie Pusser review all of the submittals and select the top 5 out of 14 for the full BOC's review and interviews. The BOC would then interview the top 5 and select a firm. Then the legal department would negotiate the contract. So that's what we're proposing to you as far as moving forward on this engineer of record selection process. And that's what we will need a vote on at the next meeting. And then, are you in agreement with us at the next meeting that you authorize us to continue to deal with Talbot and Bright to negotiate these items so that we preserve our options? I know that's a lot of moving parts because so much of it is interrelated. But what's throwing a monkey wrench in it is we're having to do this engineer of record 5-year contract right in the middle of trying to decide all of this other stuff. So,
may I ask the question?
oh, absolutely.
You went through a whole lot of stuff. Some of it I understand, some of it I don't understand. But I have a simple question here. I think it said that you want to change this, the contractual structure of the terminal. Is that true?
Of the terminal?
Yeah, you want to change the contractual structure?
Well, there was some discussion of that. We haven't made a decision yet.
But why are you changing the terminal? Is it cheaper, or you making it less costly?
Well,
That's why it came up, was because we believe that it could be done less expensive than what the current price that we have is.
So the question is, which one of those 2 methods do you use? And
Well, you're gonna have to have an architect to draw.
you'll have to start over.
That's not starting all over again.
Right.
To change.
Well, with a new architect, but you would start over, yes, ma'am.
Oh. So.
Well, we've seen
I'm saying that this is gonna cost us a lot more than we thought it was gonna cost.
Well, that's why, all we're asking you to do today is let us preserve our options.
I'm not against it. Let me make it very clear. I'm not against it. But,
And
there's a whole lot of things to think about.
right,
There's a whole lot of,
it's a big decision. But again, all we're asking for today is let us preserve both options while we study it further.
well, if you reserve both options, then can you come back and give an estimated cost of make the changes that what they were questioning in the plan? Will be cheaper for us or cost us more money?
Well, that's part of what we're trying to nail down.
Yeah, that will definitely come to the board.
Oh, it'll come to the board.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah,
ma'am.
you're
Yes,
gonna
ma'am.
make the decision.
Yeah, the Board of Commissioners will decide this, not the Airport Advisory Committee or any other ad hoc committee or anything. It will come to the full board.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I'm the only one vote on this board, but I would like to see
Well,
if this is really gonna increase the cost of, doing what we need to do at that, airport, because the terminal is not the only issue here. We've got other costs to consider too.
Yeah,
So I'm glad to hear that it will come to the board, for the board to make this decision.
absolutely.
Yeah.
All of this ultimately will be the board's decision.
Okay,
Hiring the EOR will be your decision. And then which way to go on design and construction of the airport terminal will be your decision as the board of commissioners.
But it seems to me like that is gonna, all of this that you outlined here today, it's gonna really put us way behind as far as doing what we wanna do and what we need to do at that line, at that airport.
That was my concern initially as well, and I addressed that because I was like, all right, how much can we really be saving if we're pushing this off down the road, especially when we're trying to use the airport for economic development and try to stimulate that. But the way that it was explained to me, and that's why we're trying to preserve the options, doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to go with that, but if we can save, and we're not talking about just a couple $100,000, we're talking about like millions or more. Which would help aid with other projects and stuff like that at the airport. So if we can actually get this cheaper, we're trying to keep that option as well. But the way it was conveyed to me is that it's actually not going to be prolonging the process at all.
We can't start on the terminal till we get the money from the state. That money that's been appropriated for construction. We can't do anything as far as beginning construction of the new terminal till we get that money.
Well, my understanding is that Harnett County has already received some money for the airport, from the state.
Right.
Is that not true?
Right.
Is there, that money, can that money be funded into what we plan to do at the airport?
I think what, the way it's worded in the state budget, we're okay to use some of that money for other things at the airport if we didn't spend it on the terminal.
Right.
The question for us to determine is, how much do we think we could save? The problem you have is that when you deal with somebody doing design build, you don't get, you gotta nail down all the criteria so that they know what to build. The problem you've got is that, with an architect, like with Talbot and Bright, you sat down and you discussed what you wanted. They had a few conceptual things, and then they got back and forth with you on that, and then you settled on the layout, and then the exterior and all of that.
And that's been done some time ago, right?
Yes.
Yeah, are you telling me
It's
that
like
all-
99% complete.
Right, but, I know we're gonna have a lot of factors to feed into this, and timing is one of the factors. As things, I know construction and all of that is continuing to go up every single day. So what role does that play in what we're trying to do here?
Well, I think what the committee is wanting is time to explore whether the design build option is the way to go, or do we continue on with the design build option?
And that's going to fall in line with the same timeline that we're waiting for the state in order to give us the funding.
Yeah.
So I mean, like we're really not pushing this off anywhere. Like it was said, working on our options in the interim until that comes. So if we can save, I mean, I don't even want to throw numbers out there, but say that we get like $6 million from the state in order to do this project. So, you know, and we can get this done for $4 million, then we can go ahead and use that excess money in order to work on another project that we already have in our master plan. So we're trying to get the best bang for our buck, and it still falls in the same timeline. I mean, because I had the same concern too. I was like, I don't want to be kicking this down the road. It's going to cost us more money in the future. But right now we don't have the money to spend for it. And if we did not, by whatever chance, get the money from the state, it would essentially be on the county in order to fund this. And regardless of what that is, I say that we need to, you know, push forward. I mean, because obviously the terminal is going to be the big incubator for our economic growth, or at least, you know, I think that's what everybody's trying to hope for.
That is why I was concerned about, having another architect to draw
But-
another plan for the terminal.
But instead of, like how it was the design bid build, doing the design build will actually be, correct me if I'm wrong, it shouldn't be that long of a period for the architect with a design build in order to actually.
That's what we're being told, but
Okay.
again, I have serious reservations about that. But
But-
that is what you're being told.
But we're just trying to keep our options open
Right.
at the moment to where we're not shooting ourselves in the foot when it could have been,
Right.
you know, if there's a possibility for us to save millions of dollars.
Okay, I got you. I ain't asking no questions. I just want to make sure I'm understanding what's going on here, because there's a lot of places.
It is a lot.
Moving parts to this.
There are a lot of
And-
moving parts to this, and the timelines are kind of short to preserve your options. And so we wanted to come to you today and ask you to take these steps so that would preserve our options so we can continue to study it. And part of that is, we do want to meet with the architect, because we did want to look at ways he could save money. He wants to talk with us about the design, and I think he'll be able to shed some light on design build as well. Because right now, we're trying to explore that whole area.
And let me clarify something about this money coming from the state. We've got two appropriations, okay? One is an appropriation for maintenance. That goes to every airport in the state, and that comes through Department of Aviation. And they have guidelines, how you can spend it, what you can do with it, and this, that, and the other. The $6 million it might come to us through DOA or DOT, but there are no restrictions on how we spend that money. There's no restriction on how soon we have to spend that money, but I was also told if you want to try to get funding, you know, when it comes up next year in the short session, you might want to have this money allocated and spent. But there is no restriction. This is not a grant. This is not anything that DOA has control over. They can't tell us what we can and can't do with this money. This is $6 million coming to this county to use for construction at the airport. And I notice I said construction at the airport. I didn't say what we're going to construct. That the money coming to us does not specify what we have to construct.
But let me ask one more question. This money coming to the county, but it all depends on the governor signing the budget. Does that play in it too? Or it's just automatically coming to the county?
If the governor signs the budget, we'll get the money a lot faster.
Okay.
If he doesn't sign the budget,
It's still
just like they've done in the past, they will pass a series of mini budgets, and we'll still get the money, but it's just gonna take a lot longer.
Yeah, I got you.
So in the meantime, what we'll be doing is investigating the design build part of it. We are going to look at a couple of airports that Talbot and Bright has done. We've got some square foot costs for those buildings. We have also found there's been one airport in North Carolina that was done design build, and that's the one over in Lee County. So we're setting up a visit with them. We want to go talk with their manager and get the details on that job, who did it, how long it took, what was the cost, what's the square footage, that kind of stuff. So we're trying to get all that information for the committee as well. So, and any committee members welcome to go if y'all would like to do that. I don't know when Shannon's got it scheduled, but we'll find So that's the kind of stuff we'll continue to do. And simultaneously then, you'll be working on making a decision on this engineer of record. And again, that process would start basically Friday when those applications come in. And so if you agree to all of this on Monday, then we'll be able to start that engineer of record selection process. Are y'all comfortable? So I guess the question is, are you comfortable with the process this ad hoc committee has come up with for trying to narrow down roughly 14? There may be somebody that we didn't send to that may apply. We sent it to 14 airport consultants we knew of. I think we got the list from DOA, but there may be somebody who responds just from seeing the ad on that. But our guess is we're going to be somewhere in the 14 to 15 range, maybe a few less. 2 or 3 may decide not to submit anything, but we need to narrow that down to where, unless you want the BOC to review every one of them, and that's really what the issue is do you want us to whittle it down for you to the top 5 or 6 or whatever, or do you want to do all of that yourselves?
I think it'd be more reasonable to have a committee select 5.
Yeah.
Instead of going through all those.
Well, we felt like that would be more reasonable, but again, so we just need you to be ready to vote Monday on which way you want to go with that.
Are
We
you
really need to
agreeable?
have a decision on that by Monday, because that's the one we have a deadline of November 13th on.
Yeah. Are you agreeable with that, Commissioner McCoy?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
We'll have that on there.
Yeah, just add this to the consent agenda for Monday then.
George, I had one more question. Of the 14 RFQs that have gone out, have any come in yet?
I'm sorry.
Of the 14 RFQs?
No, they have not. Barry told me as of this morning they had not. That doesn't mean anything. Normally, the RFQ process is similar to a bid process. They generally don't come in till the day before or the day of. And so I wouldn't get excited about that one way or the other. When we, once we have them all in, we'll send you an email or something to let you know how many we got. And of course, we'll be meeting the very next Monday to vote on it anyway. And then at that point, we'll have copies and we'll turn them over to the committee. And then, Lou, it might not be too soon for y'all to be talking about when you want to have that subcommittee meet that is in here to go ahead and whittle those down, because time is of the essence.
It is, yep. I would think we'll probably try to meet sometime next week.
Yeah, that would be
But
good.
I'm not committing to that. I'm saying we're going to try to.
Well, the good news is that if you were able to meet and nail down the top 5, we would have that meeting on the 26th, and you could report back at that point. And then if the board is in agreement to do those top 5, we could schedule them in and hopefully, before the 13th, get it done. Well, not hopefully, we got to get it.
Yeah.
Get it done.
And I hope we don't have to do any Zoom interviews. They can't show up in person. I just should not
Okay.
consider.
Well, I think the vast majority of them are in North Carolina, so I'm like you, if they can't get in here, that's somewhat of a red flag.
I don't want to hear they can't fly into the airport. If they don't have an airplane, they don't need to be the engineer of record at the airport. All right, anything else on concerning the Jetport? All right, let's move along to item 10, Mr. Locklear.
Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the board, couple of requests that'll be coming to you this coming Monday night. 2 rezonings and 1 text amendment. The first one that we have deals with 106 acres of land. The property applicant is Jimmy Pierce, who's a developer in the county, or has done some development in the county. The owner of the property is Thomas Chansey. It's located out in Commissioner Johnson's district, and they are proposing to rezone from RA40 to RA30. We reviewed this site, and it's got water and sewer, and it's a predominantly rural part of the county, rural area, to where they're proposing to do it at. And we recommended that we not approve it. Staff did. We spoke with Commissioner Johnson, went through some of the details because he was asking about the area. Specifically, it's largely a large swath of RA40. It is almost bordered by RA30, but it's not contiguous to it. So my history, I guess, throughout the county is this property's probably been zoned like this since 1988, when the county was originally adopted that way. Usually, folks in the area ask to be either zoned sometimes higher, like RA40, and then some folks ask to be zoned lower. Just depends on whatever the circumstances were at that time. So, and that's just certainly my personal history with it. I wasn't there in 1988. I was in junior high school in 1988. Excuse me?
You said your personal opinion, what was that? I didn't hear what you had to get people.
I can't understand what you're saying.
I said, what was your personal opinion you had?
Oh, my
to
personal,
that
I'm sorry. I thought you said Commissioner Penny. He's gone. But no, my personal opinion is the history that I've seen throughout my years here at the county is when you see swaths that are just kind of located in the middle of RA30, usually the folks during that time requested it to be RA40 for whatever reason at the time. Just like folks that didn't want zoning to begin with, you'll see a lot of that area zoned RA20R or even 20M. They'll give them the least restrictive zoning at the time. So that's just, like I said, that's just my personal history of it. I don't know if that was the case here or not. It's just what I feel. But then we had the planning board meeting, and several folks showed up in opposition. They had one spokesperson that got up and basically said, the community would like to see the parcel remain RA40 due to the rural character, and said that it was zoned RA40 for a reason, which kind of matches what I just said. So I don't know if this person had been there forever or what the situation is, but there was several members there in opposition, but they only had one spokesperson. So I just want to make sure. I don't know what they'll do this coming Monday night. I don't know if everybody will get up and speak. I don't know, but I just wanted to make the board aware of how it went at the planning board. The Danny Norris, who I think is one of the potential builders on the site, spoke for the project, and Jason Godwin, who's the engineer of record for the site, got up and spoke obviously for the project as well. They're looking to, they're saying that they have some soil issues out in the middle of the property. I don't know. And I know that this question always comes up, usually from the board, about the number of additional lots that they could receive if they're zoned. And our guesstimation, obviously there's a lot that goes into it, the soils, all these different things, but we're looking at about a 44 lot difference is what Jay estimated when we done the math on it, so to speak. And the difference of a 35,000 square foot lot and a 25,000 square foot lot to get those numbers that I just said. And I think they could possibly do some other stuff and maybe get down to a 28,000 or 20,000 square foot lot. So that's if they do a whole lot of other things, because there's a lot of variables that could go into it. I just want to try to make you aware of them all. The planning board voted they went against our recommendation, and they voted to approve it 3-1. There was 4 members there that night, so they voted 3-1. So it certainly can somewhat complicate the issue, but just to make you aware of all the variables before we get to our meeting on Monday night. Okay? Are there any other questions?
Is the recommendation from Development Systems still to not approve this?
Yes. Yeah, we stand by our initial recommendation to not approve it. The planning board, just so you know, some of their comments were schools have capacity in the area, so that's really not an issue. So they thought that was it. Losing regular lots via the soil, so I think they were taken by the soils comments that was made by the engineer, and that had an effect on their opinion, and that was it. That's what I had.
My question to the planning board is, have you ever tried to drive down Hodges Chapel Road?
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah,
that's a major cut through that is just getting more and more congested. So.
As an old gentleman on WRL used to say, I rest my case. Call your next case.
Right. Any other questions?
I was just, I've got several calls about that, all opposed to it, and
Right.
the road in front of that's just terrible.
It is.
It's gonna move. I'm not for changing the character of the country down there. That's why people move out there.
Amen.
Will that require a turning lane to cut into the property?
Obviously, that's handled through DOT, but most likely, if depending on the number of lots, the traffic counts and all those good things, and obviously we know the situation out at the road, so most likely there would be some type of turning lane or deceleration lane or something added to the property in order for it to be developed. That's typical these days.
When you go out to the lot and looking at it, is there a big wet area right in the middle of that property?
Yeah, that's the soils issue that they're talking about.
Yeah,
So,
it looks pretty good size.
Yeah, they got a legitimate, I mean, you can see it, I don't know if you have a staff report, but you can, it sits right in the middle of it. So they probably got a little low area or some type of soils issue out there. So, they have a legitimate concern with what they're saying on that side of the question. So.
Any additional questions about this? We still have to have a public hearing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So have we advertised this already for a public hearing?
Yes, yeah, we should have.
We have? Okay. So this will be on our agenda for Monday night.
Yep,
You've done them for all three cases, haven't you?
Yes, they have.
we take care of that. We've done it.
Yeah. All right. Plan 2109-0002.
Yep, our second request is a rezoning request, a lot less controversial, I guess you could call it. It's located out in Commissioner Nichols' district, on Barbecue Church Road, out in the Olivia area. They're requesting a rezoning from RA20R to commercial. I'm not gonna try to say that last name, Saskinski or something like that. I'll have it figured out between now and Monday, though, I promise. But they're looking at rezoning an 1.5 acres, 1.5 acres, I should say, 1.1 acres, I'm sorry, and Barbecue Township. And this is located in what we call a rural development node. There is some commercial property. Most of the property across the street is on commercial. It looks like they're trying to go across the street. We had one person show up, and he wasn't in opposition, just basically asked a question of, kind of what was going on, and didn't speak in opposition. And that was it. We recommended approving that because its location in our, what we call a rural development.
So this is across from the car wash there,
The car wash.
and the other dollar store.
And the
Right
what?
there, and
Your
then
favorite dollar store?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the good news is I don't think it'll be a Dollar Tree, or a Dollar General.
I can only hope not.
Yeah, I understand. I'm not sure if there's any specific plans for the site or anything. I think they're just preparing to do something down the road, maybe. I'm not sure. Any other questions on that?
Questions or comments? All right, moving along.
I'll move to the last one. The last one's a text amendment. I actually brought this before the board a while ago at a work session and told you that it was coming, but we just hadn't had time to really get it on the agenda, so we threw it on this one to just go ahead and knock it out. In our efforts to be good neighbors with Fort Bragg, for most of y'all are aware, we have a military corridor overlay. In the county, it's a 5-mile area that hangs out just as wherever Fort Bragg property touches us. It basically says anything that happens inside this area, we have to let the base know that something's going on, usually rezoning, site plans, everything we send to RULAC, which is a local advisory board, which the county is part of. And I actually serve on that board of directors, actually. And that group helped Fort Bragg do what they call the JLUIS, which is their joint land use plan, basically Fort Bragg's big land use plan. And in that plan, one of the recommendations were to come up with a series of add-ons that local communities that are adjacent to Fort Bragg could adopt and put in their ordinance and be good neighbors to Fort Bragg, basically. It's no real recommendations, no regulation, I should say. It's basically a lot of recommendations. Harnett County, we had already made that move with our military corridor overlay. So we were kind of already there. And so this plan basically provided language to all the surrounding counties that they could put in their ordinance to make it more clear that they were more military friendly, and to make it more clear to whoever may read the ordinance or whoever may be, making a recommendation to boards such as this one, on what to do. So basically, that's what this text amendment does. It's additional information or additional language that will go in our already existing military corridor overlay portion of our UDO, and it'll cover things like for example, the first one's reasonable regulations with applicable aircraft noise zones, imagery, surface areas, active airspace, and limitations on height and man-made structures. Basically, don't go put a church steeple if we're going to be bringing our planes through here, if that makes any sense. We already knew that. This language says it in a more clear, a more specific way, so to speak. So it'll do things like that. That'll have there. A large part of it is definitions, because some of what I just mentioned, the aircraft noise zones and airport obstruction and interference and all that can get sort of technical. So a lot of ordinances always define those, and that's what a lot of this text amendment would be for. So basically, like I said, no regulation other than what we already have, no different than what we already have, which basically says if you do anything in the 5 mile, you have to let us know, which is a state law. And that's it. I mean, I could read you all these definitions, but I know it's been a long morning for you guys. I don't want to complicate it any more than it needs to be. We good?
Yes, sir.
All right.
All right, thanks, sir.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Mr. Wood, County Manager's report.
Well, we've got the agenda review, applications to serve on boards, and I think that's it. I did want to let you know I've been in contact with both Bob Slavin and also Ernie Pearson. So both those searches are going well. My sense is that Mr. Slavin will probably be back to you sometime in the next 2 weeks. I think this week ends 3 weeks that's been advertised. So another week or two, and I would think he would probably have his pool of applicants and then start, and it's going through them. And so hopefully should have a recommendation to you in the not too distant future, and then you can start your interview process. The one on the economic developer is probably a week or so behind that, so it'll be the same process. So those will be coming up shortly for your consideration.
Do you know about when they'll come up? People keep asking, how's the search for the new manager going? And
well, it's been out about 3 weeks. My sense is that after a 30-day period, that should pretty much be the pool. They should have the pool. And I think as they're going through it, they're already starting to narrow down. But they are continuing to recruit as well. So that's really about all I can tell you at this point. I don't know any of the names, don't want to know any of the names. We're just waiting until we the notice from him that he'd like to come meet with you, and then we'll be ready to go.
Right.
The only thing I would say is you guys are gonna be busy in probably late October and then the first part of November. But with any luck, we can have both those selection processes done by mid-November.
Outstanding.
And if we do that, then hopefully one or both may be on board before the end of the year.
Let's see, on these appointments, we've got one from District 5. Have you had a chance to look at that?
I have not.
Okay. How about letting the commissioners know your thoughts on that before Monday? And then on the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council, we have one from District 1 and one from District 3 and one from District 2. Any thoughts from Commissioner 1 or Commissioner 2? Okay. Okay, well, we'll, if you have any comments or any questions, we can discuss that Monday night. I have one other question on the proposed agenda that's coming up. Item 10 on the second page.
Yeah.
What is that?
Though you get grants from the Department of Transportation each year, these are a significant part of your funding source for HARTs. And before you can accept them, you have to have public hearings on that. So this is just having a public hearing so that we can do that. But 5311 and 5307 are grants to run the system. It's basically what it amounts to.
Okay, all right. I didn't know, so I had to ask.
Do you want to go through the agenda now?
What's the wishes of the board? You want to go through the agenda, or you want to just look it over and then contact Mr. Wood if you have questions?
Sounds like a good idea.
I did.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll look over the agenda, and if we have any questions, we'll call you or call each other or something.
Okay, that'll be fine.
All right.
Can I mention one thing? On number 13, this is critical that we get that done. The schools have agreed to purchase the property we've been talking about. They'll be using lottery funds, and so we've got to approve their application to draw that down, lottery money down. And what we'll also have for you is a budget amendment authorizing the expenditure of that money, which basically entails us drawing it down and then turning it over to them for the purchase of that land.
Okay.
Can I ask a question on that? Is this lottery fund money that we already have?
Yes.
Yeah, because I know-
This is lottery money sitting in Raleigh, you just have to draw it down.
Okay, that's
So
what I want
they
to
do,
know. but I know
it's
the
actually
person
their
who did it.
application, but you're required to sign off on it, isn't that right, Kim?
Yes, sir, Mr. Wood, and just to kind of add to what Commissioner McCoy had just requested, currently there is about 1.4 million still sitting in that lottery.
Okay.
That's, because I know we do defer that lottery, future lottery earnings, but there's still 1.4 that has always been set aside previously for land. So if you recall, the board had approved a funding mechanism to give the school system 65% of the prior lottery revenue each year for capital maintenance items at a minimum, and then the remaining percentage is set aside to purchase land for the future. And so this is that money that's left over.
Just sit there.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. All right, do we have a need for a closed session today?
No, sir.
With seeing no need for a closed session, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make the motion, we adjourn.
Do I hear a second?
We
Excuse me.
do have a closed session. We do need a closed session.
Mr. Commissioner Johnson, will you withdraw your motion?
Oh, okay. I would ask that the Commissioner make a motion to go into closed session for the purpose of discussing potential land acquisition negotiations by the county.
Make a motion that we go into closed session for purposes of discussing the land swap with the county and
Come under land acquisition.
Land acquisition.
land acquisition.
Second that motion.
I got a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? We're now in closed session.